Hello, Fluffers! My name is Felix, a purple wolf from the United States.
And my name is Uno, and I'm a green raccoon from the United Kingdom.
And welcome back to Fluff It, a podcast for furries by furries. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you all for joining us this time. We're really excited to be back with another episode. And this episode's topic is quite a specific one, but it's one that I find very interesting. We're going to be talking about Sonic the Hedgehog and a little bit about what Sonic is and the kind of impact the franchise has had on furries.
Yeah, we decided to do Sonic because first, Uno is one of the biggest Sonic fans in the world. And since Sonic is the first Sonic movie, the movie director actually graduated from my college. Go Armadillos, woohoo! But with the second one coming around, Sonic has definitely come back into the headlines and on social media. He's becoming quite trendy. So we wanted to talk about what exactly is Sonic the Hedgehog and how Sonic impacts the furry fandom, especially with someone who's really a big fan of Sonic and someone who's never quite got into it.
Yeah, so as Felix mentioned, I'm a really big Sonic fan. I've always been a Sonic fan since being a kid, and it's kind of one of those things where I kind of think to myself, oh yeah, I'm not as into it as I used to be. But then whenever I kind of start thinking about it, I just kind of fall straight back into the hole. So yeah, so the first kind of initial topic, I suppose, really is what exactly is Sonic the Hedgehog? So he's I think as most people will know, he's a very extremely popular video game mascot that was created in the 90s. And he's kind of a character, interestingly, that's just been relevant for a very long time. And definitely has had phases of being more popular than other times, but I feel like he's never really sort of faded out of existence at
Yeah,
all.
he's never fallen off the map, kind of like Spyro in Crash Bandicoot. And while there's definitely been times where he's had some low points, he's definitely still been very popular because remember seeing some of the earliest 90s Sonic the Hedgehog commercials, and they're like some of the most 90s things out there. And
Yeah.
it's interesting this to see Sonic, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's interesting to see how he has kind of evolved. And it's interesting because it feels like Sonic is starting to come back from he's becoming more popular again. And it's not really been a video game that's making him more popular right now because for anyone who didn't know, Sonic has a lot of TV shows, he's had a lot of comics, and he's had a successful movie that started off a little shaky with CGI, but has drastically improved and looks amazing.
Yeah, so I really think I think there's always been an audience out there for Sonic, definitely, but the movie, I think especially because an interesting thing that the movie did is it took the character and put it into a totally new story in a way. So I think the movie really opens up for a new audience. So like obviously there'd be kids who'd watch the movie who then might get into the games and kind of learn about some of the older games and the older like history behind Sonic and stuff. So I think the movie is definitely a good sort of introduction for newer fans, but it will also have an audience with the people who've been into it forever. So I can definitely see why that's incredibly popular and why the second one looks like it's also going to be incredibly popular.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things, I've not seen the Sonic movie yet, which is a huge sin, especially with the director coming from my college, but I'm very much intrigued and watching it. And the one thing that's really interesting for me is that a lot of video game movies or movies that originated from video games often don't do so hot in the box office, and they kind of fallen off the map. I mean, there was a Ratchet and Clank movie that didn't do so hot, and you don't really hear much about it. But Sonic the Hedgehog actually produced some really good results. It got well received from both critics and audiences, and I found that to be interesting because I remember because my first exposure of Sonic was the video game Sonic Adventure 2 and Shadow the Hedgehog, which we'll talk about that a little bit later, but one of the more interesting games. But one of the things that I found interesting is it seems like a lot of the people who I knew who loved Sonic, one of the biggest things they loved was not the games but the comics and the TV shows. And I was just curious, how do those align with the video games and what's the current state of the shows and the comics?
So it's the to be honest, there's a lot I could talk about in terms of that, but it's actually really quite interesting because I mean, as a kid, I got into Sonic through the kind of early 2000s era, so like Sonic from kind of Sonic Adventure up to sort of Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, so that kind of window of about 10 years was when I grew up with it. But I also used to watch the shows and read the comics as well. And it's quite interesting because the shows are drastically different from each other, like to a point that thinking about it is crazy, to be honest. Because I think what happens with the shows is that they're kind of, especially with the early shows, they're kind of given a brief to make a show based on Sonic, which obviously in the 90s was only a video game. And then the shows kind of come out with these very different vibes. So the first ever show was Adventures of Sonic, which I really liked as a kid, but it had a very like Looney Tunes kind of vibe to it that didn't really tie into the games other than the characters. So you had Sonic, Tails, and Dr. Robotnik, but their sort of world in that show was very different to the games. And then there was the Saturday morning Sonic the Hedgehog, which also did the same thing where it had Sonic and Tails, but then they introduced a cast of characters that have never actually been in the games. And the same thing with Sonic Underground, which came in the late 90s. That again took Sonic as a character and put him in a world that is entirely 100% different from the games. And then after that, Sonic X obviously was inspired by Sonic Adventure, but also again a different world from the games. And the newest show, which is Sonic Boom, is also very
Kind of gone
different.
back to like the
Yeah, so it's weird because none of the shows really tie into the games. However, in the comics, they actually introduced sort of a multiverse, which made that make sense, which is actually the reason why I really love the comics a lot, is because they'll take kind of aspects of all of the shows and all of the games and introduce them into sort of a multiverse. So there's like a main storyline of the comics, but also the version of Sonic from Sonic Underground also exists, but in a different dimension. So it's really just a Sonic multiverse, very much like the Marvel multiverse or the DC
when in doubt, multiverse.
Exactly. So initially, the shows were not at all related, but the comics made them related, which I think is really cool. And the current state of the shows, I think the only show that's happening recently, I don't even know if it's still
Sonic Boom, I think, is still going.
Sonic Boom, yeah. So yeah, it's just Sonic Boom, but there has been talk of a new one.
Oh, I did not know about that.
A few years, I think, but to be honest, I don't know much about that. I haven't kept up with it.
Will probably happen at some point.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And same with the comics. I mean, the comics used to be distributed by Archie Comics, and those ones got cancelled due to some sort of copyright issues, I think. But there is a new company now doing the comics, but again, I haven't kept up with those in a long time. But they are still going as far as I know, so that's always good.
Yeah, that's always been one of my biggest questions with Sonic the Hedgehog, and because I got introduced, the first exposure I got of Sonic was Sonic Adventure, and that was probably kind of like the mainstream Sonic thing when I think of Sonic in my head is that era. But you like look around the corner and like or you can like blink your eyes 1 second Sonic is like goofy, like family friendly, and then you close your eyes, you open them up again, and you have a hedgehog with a machine gun, and you're like, whoa, how did we get here? And that's one of my biggest like questions about Sonic the Hedgehog, because there's definitely states of characters like Batman, like Mario, where they have a lot, because Mario, for example, is much more campy. It's happy endings. It's more Yahoo, and here we go. And then occasionally you do get like some edgier games like Mario Strikers, which you can headbutt people into electric fences, Toads, Koopas, Yoshis explode, and Mario characters are generally rude towards one another, which is unheard of in most Mario games. But with Sonic, it's like there's a lot of games where it's definitely more on the campy side, and then there are some other games that are definitely more intense, more on the gritty, edgy side. So I'm a little curious. Why do you think that's the case? And is that this because there's many renditions of Sonic, or is it Sega not being able to find a style or tone that they're happy with?
So I think there's a couple of reasons for that, to be honest. Because I mean, originally the Sonic games from the 90s were very sort of happy and goofy and cartoony. But there was, I mean, the storyline of it is that Dr. Robotnik is basically kidnapping animals and turning them into robots. So there was always that sort of slightly darker storyline when you actually think about what the storyline is. But obviously when Sonic Adventure came out, I think the main reason for it is just that like Sega was kind of trying to appeal to a different audience, or kind of like a modern audience. So it was probably the idea that because video games were obviously becoming more advanced and people kind of, I suppose, like slightly older audiences probably wouldn't be wanting to settle for like just happy cartoony stuff anymore. They probably wanted something a bit more like edgy and a bit more a more kind of adventure based in a way. So I think a lot of it has to do with they were trying to branch out to like a modern audience. But then I think what happened after that, I mean, don't quote me on this because it might not be accurate at all, but this is my kind of interpretation, is that because people probably enjoyed both, or, you know, some people enjoyed the classic cartoony style ones, some people enjoyed the kind of edgy ones. So I think they kind of continued with both. But because they continue with both, you end up with this sort of like mishmash of like 1 minute everything's really brightly colored and like sort of cheesy and funny, and the next minute you have like machine guns and like the military and like giant monsters and stuff. But I mean, I grew up with the edgy era of Sonic, and I think like that was really the version that I liked, but I also really like the cartoony sort of more light-hearted stuff. So I think I always just really liked the combination of that.
Like a blend?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do like the combination, which is why Sega has obviously continued to do both rather than abandoning one or the other, because I just think there's an audience for both.
Yeah, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, I was talking about this regarding Batman a few weeks ago because there was a clip on YouTube where Batman and the Joker like go compete with one another on in a surfing competition, and it's one of the goofiest episodes of the '60s I've ever seen. And then, but like today, Batman stuff is like really like edgy, very dark, and not as colorful like the poppy colors of the 1960s Batman show.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's people who love that 1960s Batman, and then there's people who love the completely dark edgy, and that's completely all right. I don't think fandom or franchises need to have a continuity regarding with canon. I mean, for some franchises like Star Wars, that's extremely important, but there's plenty of franchises such as Sonic where you can kind of like reset the origin game or origin story a few times, and it does not really anyone is too bothered by it. Now, I do want to ask, if you did make a Sonic game, what type of tone would you like make it in?
If it was up to me, I would go with the edgy version of Sonic, but the very specifically the kind of Sonic Adventure era that was very edgy but almost trying too hard to be edgy, so it became kind of cheesy in a way. But I absolutely love that, like the early 2000s like edginess. To me, it has a similar feel to like the really cheesy old Resident Evil movies and stuff like that. It's that kind of early 2000s, let's try as hard as we can to be really edgy, but the main character is still a blue hedgehog. But I absolutely love that. That appeals to me so much. So I would definitely go with that. That's sort of really epic adventure, but still with these cartoony, colorful characters in that scenario. I just think it works so well for Sonic.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the amazing thing about the early 2000s is it's not just with Sonic the Hedgehog. I mean, it's like even TV commercials going back to last week's episode or last episode since we record every other week. It's like there was like a Cheeto ad where like it was like the edgiest thing ever, and it was like the Cheeto Cheetah. I'm like, what the heck? As a child, I'm like, okay, I'm in. And then so that's kind of how I would make a Sonic game, and I've not really played any of them too much. I've played Sonic 2, I've played Sonic Adventure 2, and I've played the DS game with Blaze the Cat a little bit, but that's pretty much all of the Sonic that... Oh, probably the biggest Sonic game I have played is Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, but I don't know if I should count that because I would always play the Mario characters for the most part. Except in the swimming competition, I would use Sonic then, which ironically he's really good in that event despite not being able to swim. So, and I mean, that's definitely one thing that I find really interesting about Sonic is you have all of these very different characters from all of the variations, and some are reoccurring and some are unique. So I kind of wanted to ask, what are some of your favorite characters in the Sonic franchise? And this might be a tougher question, my apologies, is what characters do you think I would be very interested in learning more about?
Well, my favorite character for a long time as a kid was actually Silver, who wasn't actually introduced until 2006, but I really like Silver. I just think he has a cool design. I like Sonic himself, obviously Tails and Knuckles. And more recently, like I really like Shadow just because like now I'm a bit older, like I can appreciate that like really trying hard to be edgy, and I just think it's really funny and really amusing. So Shadow's definitely up there as one of my favorites now as well. But to be honest, there's so many Sonic characters because if you include the comics and the shows as well, there's like hundreds of characters. So it's hard to pick a favorite. But I think characters that you'd be interested in, I think definitely kind of the main ones like Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, because they're the characters that everyone loves. So, and they have a lot of sort of backstory and stuff. So I think you would probably really like them. I'm not sure who else. It'd be interesting actually if you did get more into some of the games or the comics or anything to like hear who your favorite characters are.
Yeah, because
kind of hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with a bunch of the characters to an extent. While I never got into the Sonic franchise, I knew a lot of people who were really big fans of the Sonic franchise and talked about the characters. I remember one of my neighbors in elementary school, he was the biggest Shadow the Hedgehog fan. And I got to hear a whole lot about Shadow, and I guess the characters that so he would allow me to play his game, but he would only allow me to play Big the Cat. That mission where he's like trying to find the frog. So
yeah,
and that's just because Big is purple. I mean, I love purple cats, so Big the Cat, I'm all for that. But two other characters I found interesting, this kind of looking on the outside, is Miles Prowler, which is Tails. Tails is adorable, and then Vector. I've been very interested in learning more about Vector. I guess just the design, and also correct me if I'm wrong, but Vector or is it Vector or Victor?
Vector.
Vector. Yeah. Okay, I got it correct. I forgot the Chameleon and the Bee characters' names.
Yeah, Espio and Charmy.
Espio and what was the other one?
Charmy.
Charmy. I don't know if they're like anti-heroes, morally gray characters, but they've always been interesting. This looking on the outside, and then I've been also a little bit curious with Silver a little as well.
Yeah,
but I would say primarily Vector and Tails.
Yeah, because I mean the Team Chaotix is the name of like the group Vector, Espio, and Charmy, and they are kind of anti-heroes because they're detectives, so they just kind of work for whoever's going to pay them in a way.
Mercenary detectives. I like
So
that.
like
I like that. I'm already intrigued now.
so for example, like in Sonic Heroes, basically you can play as a team at once. So like each team has a different sort of objective. So like when you play as Team Sonic, like it's really fast paced and really like just like going for it. But then when you play as Team Chaotix, they actually have like detective missions. So you have to find things and like sort of finish missions rather than just completing the levels, which I always thought was quite interesting. But like those ones were way too hard for me as a kid,
I
but
would probably
they
love
were
those going back to
interesting.
those games. I mean, those missions would fascinate me. I mean, I did remember seeing some of the Sonic Adventure 2 missions with Tails having to chase Eggman. That was kind of the first massive exposure I got to the Sonic franchise. So it was actually Tails, not Sonic, I think.
Yeah.
And I also saw the Pumpkin Island missions with Knuckles. But that does make me wonder because I know how I got introduced to Mario. I know how I got introduced to Crash Bandicoot. So, but I've never really gotten into Sonic the Hedgehog all that much. And I'm curious how did you get into the Sonic franchise as a fan?
So I got into it first. I mean, I was into Crash Bandicoot. I mean, Crash Bandicoot is my favorite franchise ever, and I was into that. Crash and Rayman, actually, I was really into before I
Oh,
got into
I love
Sonic.
Rayman. More
Rayman's
specifically,
amazing.
those rabbits.
Yeah, but yeah, I used to play a lot of Crash and specifically Rayman 3 was my favorite. So I used to play those a lot, and then I got into Sonic actually because not through myself, but one of my friends had one of the games, and honestly, I can't remember which game it was. I think it might have been Sonic Heroes. But I remember playing that at my friend's house and just thinking it was so much fun. But as a kid, obviously, you don't really have the sort of criticism for the games, so you're just kind of into the characters and stuff. So afterwards, I got really into like Sonic Underground because that used to be on TV, and it was like the one thing I sort of had access to at the time. But then just like very quickly after that, I started to collect some of the games for the PS2 and just got really into the characters and stuff. And I think, like I was saying earlier, it's like the edginess of it that really appealed to me because I really like that sort of vibe for things. But obviously at the time I was only a young kid, so I was sort of at that age where like that you can't see how sort of cheesy it is, and you just think it's really cool that there's a hedgehog with a machine gun. Like you don't really think about how silly that is really. But that's definitely how I got into it. It just sort of went from there. I was just really drawn to the characters and the art style. And I mean, even things like the music of like the early 2000s had this sort of like rock based
Yeah, I
soundtrack.
was about to say rock.
Like, yeah, like that definitely impacted my taste in music nowadays, like for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I
um,
definitely would
yeah,
say that's the same for me, but with Crash, and we can talk about
yeah.
that specifically in a Crash episode with like
Mm.
a synth, like spacey type music and the from the Game Boy games. I mean, the Game Boy games with Crash was a little edgier, but I digress
Yeah.
on that. We're talking about Sonic, not Crash. As something determined. But yeah, I think that's probably the reason why I never got into Sonic as a child was the potentially the edginess. I'm not exactly sure because I didn't hate Sonic as a child. I just never got into it despite having friends who were really big into it. I think maybe one of the biggest reasons was I got kind of brainwashed to be a more of a Nintendo crazy. So I really loved Mario, and it's interesting because one of my favorite Mario games was Mario Strikers, which is probably the edgiest Mario game, probably edgier than many Sonic games to begin with. So I just find that interesting, but it was probably a combination of getting into Nintendo and playing Nintendo games. It was probably also not getting any Sonic games as a child. I would get Crash, I would get Mario games. I would get rabid games, and that was probably one of the biggest mistakes in my parents' lives because I would never shut up about the rabbits. Rabbids 2, amazing, love it. But that's maybe the reason why is this kind of like I was more like the goofy, cartoony type person. I've always grown up loving Tom and Jerry, Hanna Barbera, and those storylines are definitely more. While they definitely had some dark elements to them, they were definitely more on the goofy, like funny side. And I think that's maybe why I didn't get into Sonic because when I was growing up, it was Sonic was in his edgy stage with Sonic Adventure, Sonic 06, and that probably impacted that. If Sonic was going through his like first couple games, like Sonic 1, Sonic 2, I probably would have gotten into it, but it's interesting because now with that said, I've always tiptoed around the Sonic franchise. When Sonic Boom became a thing in 2014, I was on the edge of maybe trying it out. I never quite got the game. I don't exactly know why, but I found the designs to be very interesting. And then I've been very curious with the comics and just talking with people that have been very into the games. I've been very curious, but at the same time, I haven't gotten someone to like push me exactly into the Sonic pool. And that was until I met you. Because I feel because Uno has like it's kind of like going into like a pool. It's like the safe, shallow end. Uno pushed me into the deep end with no flotation. I mean, I'm like spazzing like Sonic in the pool right now. But my creative or like my interests in creative like games, stories, they always change every once in a while. And I've been very curious with edgier stories, not edgy, but that's where I've started to slowly become very interested into Sonic, and I'm super glad Uno has started to talk with me about Sonic because it's something I want to like really try out. And I hope I'm not been rambling too much, although I would be keeping up to my name.
No, you're fine. Yeah, so I mean, the like I've already said, I mean, it's you've got a bit of everything with Sonic because you've got the sort of goofy, cartoony storylines, but then you've also got the edgy storylines. So you know, if you like one better than the other, you don't have to get too involved in both. I mean, I didn't keep up with Sonic a lot around the 2014 sort of time. To be honest, a lot of that was to do with me becoming really into being a furry then and getting into fursuiting. I kind of was putting all my focus into that. But that was also the time when Sonic Boom and stuff came out, and like I do really like Sonic Boom, but it just for some reason the kind of goofier stories just don't hold my attention as much as the edgy ones do. So like, well, when it comes to Sonic anyway, I mean, I love classic cartoons and stuff, but it never really held my attention very much. So I didn't get back into it properly until sort of Sonic Forces came out,
Yeah, that
which I
was
know
edgy itself.
a lot of people don't like that game for whatever reasons, but I absolutely love that game. I mean, I love the character creation, but I love like just the edginess of it because it feels like one of the older ones. It feels like Sonic Adventure or, you know, Sonic Heroes and Sonic Unleashed, and they were my favorites growing up. So when Sonic Forces came out, that kind of threw me back into the Sonic hole because it had that really sort of edgy, sort of cheesy yet edgy storyline that I really like when it comes to Sonic. And I mean, I've always been a cartoon fan. I love light-hearted stuff. I love Looney Tunes and all the kind of light-hearted cartoons. But I just think when it comes to Sonic, it's unique in how edgy it can be at times, and it's unique in how much like backstory there is and how dark it can get sometimes,
Yeah, I
which is
mean,
really that's always really drawn me into it because it's just so interesting. And I think there's so much to be done with it that, you know, why wouldn't they kind of bring back these kind of stories?
yeah, that always fascinated me a little bit with Sonic was because I think a big reason why I loved Mario and Crash Bandicoot was I loved the characters and designs, but also I enjoyed those games and being someone who had trouble reading As a small child with speech impediment, it was hard for me to like read like text and all of that. So that probably also potentially impacted why I didn't get into Sonic, because Sonic is a very story driven character and a lot of
Mm.
those games are very story driven do and as a overall basis. And I think that's one of the coolest things about Sonic is that there's a story in each of those games, and regardless of if you're more into the more classic stories or more of the Sonic Adventure type stories, there's stuff that's one thing I really appreciate about Sonic the Hedgehog is that they have all of this lore and they have all of like these like they have a story Bible and a character Bible for their franchise and characters. That's one thing I really respect Sega for. I hoped that some other video game franchises could start doing a little bit more with that. Um, is this letting us see the world through a microscope and like allowing fans to like read and invest more time into the franchise, because I would definitely would have loved a Mario comic, a Mario TV show that maybe invested more into the stories of each character. Same thing with Crash, Spyro, and I Spyro started to get that with Skylanders. But that's
Mm.
one thing I've always appreciated about the Sonic franchise. And it's something that I feel like it's overdue because um, for me to get into Sonic, because I feel like Sonic's done a huge favor for the furry fandom. And maybe you could share like how Sonic's impacted you as a furry. Do you think he in some way pushed you into the furry fandom or helped that push?
I definitely think so in a way. I mean, I was always similar to you. I grew up with Looney Tunes and Disney and stuff, so they were sort of my first sort of exposure to like furry characters. But Sonic was definitely an early one because I was into Crash, and then Sonic. I got into Sonic sort of by extension because I really liked Crash, and then got really into Sonic as I mentioned before. But I think it was a lot to do with that I was really getting into those sort of more edgy storylines. So Crash and Sonic were the two like somewhat kind of edgy characters, and same with Ratchet and Clank that I really liked. So they were all sort of grouped together as like these video game characters that I loved as a kid. And I suppose like because of the age I was at the time, it was easier for me to be into I like amphro animals and stuff with these kind of storylines. And like, then growing up, I never lost interest in them. I still like them now. So when I did sort of discover furries and stuff, it was definitely by extension on that because my first kind of experience with being on the internet was being into these characters like Sonic and Crash and all the kind of video game characters. So I sort of found furry art through that and eventually found fursuiters through that. So it definitely did lead onto it. It was just that kind of interest in amphro animals that
Yeah.
then led me on to obviously being interested in furries, which I think is the same for lots of other
Mhm.
furries. I'm sure plenty of them will have grown up with Sonic as one of their many influences in furriness.
Yeah, I mean, and even to some extent for me, because I mean, I've never gotten into full-fledged Sonic fandom, but I mean, the fact that it was encouraging to see that people were creating characters through anthropomorphic, and people were celebrating the Sonic fandom through their own creative characters. But with Sonic Forces, I mean, it's really cool that the developers are embracing that a bit with allowing people to kind of create their own Sonic Sona and have them help Sonic and those characters. I honestly feel like if I made a Sonic OC today, it would probably be more like Big the Cat. Let me go find that frog. Like big edgy explosions in the background. Nah, frog jumping into water, I can't reach
Yeah.
it. Sad face. So, but I mean, that kind of leads to my final question for you regarding this is what should I be doing today once I get off the recording for regarding Sonic?
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things that I think most people kind of get into by accident or just through trying out the games and enjoying them and stuff. I mean, for me as a kid, I really didn't really know anything about it before just enjoying the games, but there's not really a starting point. I definitely say sort of go with what interests you. So like whatever game you think looks the most fun, you might want to give that a go. Or if you want to get into the comics are kind of like, it's a bit weird because they've been going for literally since the 90s. So there would be a lot to catch up on. So I probably wouldn't really recommend that unless you got really into it and really wanted to give those a go. They are very good. I do recommend them, but I just think there's so many. And same with the shows, really, because they don't really tie into the games. I mean, I definitely think the games is the best way to go.
Okay.
If you were wanting to get into it, but the other stuff is worth checking out.
But, because I took a comics course last semester at my college, and one of the big examples that people brought up for comps when they came up with their own comic ideas was Sonic. There was a few examples of Archie comics being influential, and I mean, I'm very curious to learn more about those characters because I think Sonic is a cool character, but I want to learn more about those detectives now. So hopefully they have some comics of those characters.
Yeah, I mean, with the Chaotix, they have definitely been in the comics. I couldn't tell you which issues off the top of my head, but they've been in them for years. There's plenty of issues that revolve around them. I think specifically for the Chaotix, the best game actually to check out would be Sonic Heroes. It's not the best Sonic game ever, but it does have a storyline specifically for the Chaotix, so it's part of their storyline, so it's quite a good one to check out for them. But they are definitely in the comics, so it is worth looking into.
I'll definitely check that out.
It's been so long, to be honest, since I've read the comics that I couldn't tell you which ones specifically, but there definitely are some out there.
Well, we can definitely pick up on this later in another episode, especially, I mean, maybe we do a whole episode reviewing the two movies. I mean, that could be something if you, the fans, want that.
So yeah, there really is so much to check out. And I mean, I feel like a lot of the listeners will probably either already be into Sonic or, might be slightly interested or just not have any idea about it whatsoever. But I definitely think, if it's something that interests you, I highly recommend it. It's just meant to be a lot of fun and it's just a really fun franchise. I think a lot of people would enjoy it. So yeah, I hope it's been interesting to listen to me ramble about Sonic. I could literally talk about it forever, but I don't want to make this too long. So
yes, but that is today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you, Uno, for introducing me to Sonic. I definitely have some stuff I need to check out now for my own little Fluff It homework. But until the next time on Fluff It, stay fluffy and have a fluff-tastic day.
We'll see you all next time. Goodbye.